Thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm so happy to be here. Everybody hears me, right? Is it too loud? I'm so happy and to be among friends and colleagues and to have wonderful discussions about the esoteric in an academic context. How amazing is that? I have deep gratitude toward Raquel Romberg, who I know from our past at the University of Pennsylvania at different moments, but we share a lot of beautiful things and people in common, including our advisor. May he rest in peace, Roger Abrams. But I thank all the directors and administrators here at the Case E and the fellows, and a friend for you all for attending and listening. I'm going to tell you two stories today, and I hope you can practice deep listening while I do. It's only for 40 minutes, so I've timed it. Together, these stories form a kind of allegory of possession, or possession as an allegory, albeit embodied. They may also provide, these stories, a path within to the esoteric and the human imagination. So the story begins at the beginning with a citation from Genesis. Jacob was left alone, and a figure wrestled with him until the break of dawn. When he saw that he had not prevailed against him, he wrenched Jacob's hip at its socket, so that the socket of his hip was strained as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for dawn is breaking." But Jacob answered, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Said the other, "What is your name?" He replied, "Jacob." Said he, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with beings divine and human and have prevailed." Jacob asked, "Pray tell me your name." But he said, "You must not ask my name." And he took leave of him there. So Jacob named the place Penuel, meaning, "I have seen a divine being face to face, yet my life has been preserved." It was just past 3 a.m., the month of March 1995. It's a long time ago. March 1995, just past 3 a.m., and I was sound asleep in a comfortable bed in Rabat, Morocco. My third floor window facing a row of palm fronds leading like a path down the street to the mosque. I was often roused from my dreams by the ibtihalat, religious hymns that presaged the dawn call to prayer, their haunting melodies like a dirge that mourned the passing of the night. But it was not the pre-dawn ritual at the end of the block that woke me, but a voice that, loud and deep, made me start. "Hanea and Sabaqu, we will win out," it said. I awoke, and there, above my pillow, was a head with bulbous eyes and jowls. Threatening, he looked straight at me. "Hanea and Sabaqu," he said. My heart was beating through my chest, and for a moment I was literally paralyzed with fright. But then I ventured to move, reached for the light, and he disappeared. There was no other sound, the ibtihalat, not yet. This was my first encounter with Sidi Mimoun, the African jinn in the Gnawa pantheon in Morocco. It was not a dream, al-hilm in Arabic, but a vision, a ru'ya, like Moses with the burning bush or those of Hildegard of Bingen. I'm not comparing myself to a prophet or a saint, just searching for examples of what Ibn al-Arabi, the Islamic philosopher of the 12th century, called the imaginal realm, a field between the material and the spiritual, a different density of existence. Where are the limits of the body? Does it end at the skin and what psychoanalyst Didier Anzieux calls the skin ego? Or do we meld with what Merleau-Ponty calls the flesh of the world in an inter-existence, material yet not always visible? I had felt Sidi Mimun's presence at all-night ceremonies, had observed the way those possessed seemed to float up from their seats, swaying their bodies, their scarves loosening and falling to the floor. I had witnessed possessed women and men take butcher knives out of sheaths and hit their arms and legs with the metal blade, sometimes running it over their tongues as well. They stamped their bare feet, getting down on all fours and waving their faces above the brazier that sat in front of the master musician, the ma'lim, while bathing their skin in the resinous smoke. For the longest time, I remained seated, looking up at those around me, my mirror neurons, the ones that connect vision to an empathic imagination, firing wildly. But after several months, I could not resist. I got up to trance myself, and it was this act of mimesis that changed everything to come. The spirits rose up in you last night. Tlaufik al-junun al-barh, the master said to me shortly after the dawn call to prayer, the sun shining through the edges of the tent flaps that covered the rooftop in the shanty town where the ceremony had taken place. I was just dancing, I responded. The spirits rose up in you, he retorted with gruff insistence. From then on, Sidi Mimun lived in me, at least according to the community. And it is within a community, I submit, a pantheon, a plurality, that possession takes place, that it makes sense, that is, becomes sensate, palpable. Sidi Mimun's propitiants wear black. His incense is black benzoin or jawi al-kel. Sometimes people possessed by the spirits in his family turn into lions, growling and terrorizing those in their path. Like lions, the possessed are sovereigns. Indeed, in Morocco, all spirits are sovereigns of a sort. They are referred to as the owners, al-Maluk, those who possess the bodies of their propitiants. Maluk, or milk in the singular, has the same root as king, and Sidi Mimun is the king of the jinn, Malik al-Maluk. Malik, king, Maluk, owners. It is also the root for Malaka, angel, Mim, lam, kaf. I have seen a divine being face to face, yet my life has been preserved. At the time of my vision, I knew all the songs. They lived in my nervous system. I would even hear them during the day. I'd cock my head and turn around to detect their source, a neighbor's apartment or a stereo system outside. But no, it was the echo of the songs of the previous nights. The soundtrack was in my head, but I heard it as if it were outside my body. An oral hallucination or my own psychic porosity? Or did the songs take me inside myself while opening out into spiritual realms? Where, in fact, does the musical imagination reside? I became used to the fragrance of incense adhering to my skin. To smell it by chance in the market or from under someone's door would transport me to another world. The people who attended regularly were called Sahab al-Hal, the friends of the state of rapture or trance. I was now one of them. But what of this vision that spoke to me? Was it a projection that pierced the veils of my unconscious to manifest in waking life? Was it the appearance of a Jungian archetype from a collective unconscious, an emanation of the animus mundi? Was it an independent presence, a being with its own life, history, and personality? What was this conscious encounter with the milk, this owner, and what did he own? The Gnawa would say, Waqaf aliyah Sidi Mimun. Sidi Mimun stood before me, and such standing, such a satiety, carries with it an inflection, a feeling, the kind Antonio Damasio says is responsible for the very arising of consciousness. In this case, the feeling was terror, the terror of a threat to my very being and to the paradigms of my culture, generation, and rational education. Waqaf Aliyah Sidi Mimoun. Sidi Mimoun stood before me. It is the expression used when the spirit manifests, announcing him or herself to the person possessed. To stand before another is to take a stand, to be. It is what a mirror is to the self-portrait. It facilitates reflexivity, allows us to see ourselves seeing. I have seen a divine being face to face, yet my life has been preserved. This is the second story, which doesn't really have much to do with this image, so you could ignore the image. So the second story. During COVID, my mother started seeing things, or rather, people appeared to her. She would wake, and her second husband would be there, watching over her, smiling as if alive. Her mother, too, and her older brother. They all had died, passed away to the other side, as we say in English. But somehow the other side was there in her room. Ibn Arabi would say that the veil that separated the spiritual and the material worlds had parted. But what realm was this one in between the two? I was in Abu Dhabi and unable to return to the US at the time. The borders were closed and only permanent repatriation was possible. Since I had a teaching job at New York University's campus there, I had a choice to make: take my son out of high school and return to the US to be with my mother, or stay where I was, in my life, in my job, with my son in Abu Dhabi. I chose the latter and called her every night. In one conversation, she told me that she had awoken to a projection of images before her, as if her iPhone was playing one of those memory sequences, except these were life-sized and illumined in 3D. Can your phone do that? She asked me sincerely. iPhones were largely a mystery to her. Can it project photos in a dark room at night just like that? That is, in fact, hardly unimaginable, right? Had we not watched such scenarios in sci-fi movies for decades? It was like the ghosts of her past were standing up before her, like Sidi Mimoun had stood before me, ghosts in the literal machine. She told me how she'd wake up many nights to a visitation. Her deceased alcoholic husband, with whom she'd had a turbulent relationship, appeared to her in near angelic form, reformed and rehabilitated. Still, these visits were discomforting. She seemed to need reassurance. So I said what mothers all over the world say to their children: ghosts are not real. It's all in your imagination. In retrospect, and now that my mother has passed, this was not the right thing to say. My non-belief in the reality of her experiences led her to keep quiet about her subsequent visitations. She didn't want me to think she was losing her mind, a funny idiom in itself, as if a mind could be lost to its owner, wandering free, away from the cage of flesh that contains it, away from the body and brain from which it in fact arises. What is the phenomenological status of a vision? Were these visitations all in her imagination? And if so, where does imagination reside? Is it confined to the body, or is it shared? For philosopher Edward Casey, imagination is fundamentally indeterminate. Imagining, he says, is characterized by an inherent ambiguity and a tendency to invite opposite evaluations. Like a quantum particle that seems to hop around, imagination is untethered to the hard materialities of Newtonian physics. Paradoxical insofar as it may contain contradictions, sailing the limits of yes and no, reality and illusion. Casey investigates the daydream, the human faculty of creating images, stories, even worlds out of one's consciousness, the images and myths that are, for some, responsible for human evolution. Scholars of Islamic mysticism, however, would acknowledge another form of imagining, not the daydream, but the ru'ya, the vision. Henri Corbin, one of Ibn Arabi's great interpreters, says, quote, that the topographies of the visionary state are found here in the intermediate realm between waking and sleep. This here is not a place per se, but rather a portal or path to an interior state that opens onto another exteriority, an inside that leads to an outside over there, a spiritual realm in which all hears, all wears, all times and spaces are contained. In Ibn Arabi's time, the imagination was considered a faculty, a material yet invisible technique. Think of it like Foucault's technology of the self. Indeed, in his introduction to the Sufi path of knowledge, scholar and translator William Chittick notes that at some point, the Western intellectual tradition took a wrong turn. In putting complete faith in reason, he says, the West forgot that imagination opens up the soul to certain possibilities of perceiving and understanding not available to the rational mind, unquote. For Chittick, the imagination is also a faculty equal in status to rationality. Of course, we get glimpses of this world in the Western poetic tradition when Coleridge talks about the imagination as the living power and prime agent of all human perception, a repetition in the finite mind of the eternal act of creation in the infinite I am. Baudelaire asserts that imagination created the world. And later, Wallace Stevens says that imagination is the only genius. William Carlos Williams wrote, "Only the imagination is real. I've declared it time without end. If a man die, it is because death has first possessed his imagination." My mother did not have the solace of seeing her own state as a manifestation of human imagination. She was possessed by her visions and troubled. And so as soon as the travel ban lifted, I brought her to Abu Dhabi. It was November and she could get out of the impending cold. I had a spare room with a terrace. She was comfortable, but not at ease. I took her to see my doctor, who ran some tests and determined that she had congestive heart failure, a condition where the heart is not pumping properly, making water back up in the lungs. The disease had advanced, but it was not yet fatal. She began a course of medications to relieve the edema and prolong her life. Still, the spirits continued to stand up before her. She woke in the middle of the night, stood by my bed, and told me that there was someone in her room. This time she didn't know who he was. Could I please ask him to leave? She was, I presumed, confusing dreams with reality, the oneiric realm as vivid as her waking life, a place betwixt and between, where images do the work of words, where signs are not wonders, but common currency. To understand the dream life where so much of human life is spent is to learn to navigate the often turbulent waters of the unconscious, the waters that my mom was swimming in, to battle the forgetfulness of dehydration, to bring what lives in the recesses of memory into the light while it still remains. My mother, we may posit, was in an imaginal realm inhabited by others, mostly known to her, but some unknown, while my own visions were not of my ancestors, but of the jinn, a pantheon of spirits thought to live with us, but in a realm that belongs only to them. Still, these realms, though invisible, are nonetheless sensory. They are not mental confabulations living in some ether, but different kinds of realities, an embodied imagination, one might say, or even an extended consciousness. When Sidi Mimun or any of the other jinn in the pantheon possesses someone, the line between self and other becomes indistinct. One is miskun, inhabited, from the Arabic word sakana, to dwell or settle. The spirit resides in the body. It takes hold of oneself. One is touched from the inside out, not as a lover or a parent touches, but again, to invoke Merleau-Ponty, as one hand feels itself touching the other, or as musical vibration imbues the very sinews of the body. The proprioception of the spirit is also my proprioception. The central nervous system is both mine and another's. It is a being there and a being away, as anthropologist Steve Friedson says, like a particle that exists and then doesn't, like an electron that produces a photon only to absorb it, a kind of spooky action at a distance. It is also near, as close as our breath. We are entangled with it as with an angel, a spirit, a cipher for the unknowable. That I saw the face of Sidi Mimoun, the face, is significant. This face, so different from my own, in color, gender, in cultural background, the face of the other in me. Levinas might say, a face that for him incurs an ethical obligation to the other. But what did I owe Sidi Mimoun? You may be familiar with this quote. I'll not read it. You can peruse it. For Levinas, we have an ethical obligation, and it's the face that forbids violence because it personalizes the person before me. It renders that person a subject. But what did I owe Sidi Mimoun? Is this the meaning of propitiation? To give to the spirit a piece of my flesh, a sacrifice that incurs a lifelong relation, what Merleau-Ponty would call an intercorporeity, the flesh of my body intertwined with the flesh of the spirit in the flesh of our coterminous worlds. Might we consider possession a modeling of symbiosis, a sharing of power in a dance of being and otherness within the confines of one body, one residence? There is, of course, no such thing as a complete balance of power. Spirit possession is also about struggle, the primordial one that brings us face to face with an ineffable force that threatens to annihilate us. The name, the angel that has no name. Every angel is terror, Rilke notes in his first Duino elegy, who, if I cried out, would hear me among the angelic orders. And even if one were to suddenly take me to its heart, I would vanish into its stronger existence, for beauty is nothing but the beginning of terror that we are still able to bear, and we revere it so because it calmly disdains to destroy us. Every angel is terror. This is the sublime, the sacred. In possession, this experience vibrates the cells of our bodies, unhinging them from the habitual time-space trajectories. And is this really so strange? In the 4 billion years that it has taken for life to evolve, there has been nothing but this play of inner and outer, of cell and host, cell and other, host and visitor. The very transition from a single-celled organism to a complex one that went on to further diversify into bodies of different species and kind first took place as a possession, an inhabitation that then begat a cooperation in order for a new organism to thrive. Perhaps the possessed are not involved in exceeding the bounds of human existence, that is, transcending it, so much as acceding to the millions of years of biology that have set the stage for consciousness, including the ability to morph into other forms in evolution and in processes of acculturation. Perhaps We are creating new synapses in the brain, other ways to be sentient. Cells merge with other cells, after all. Their plasma membranes fuse, and subsequent hybrid cells carry the DNA of all the others. That is, in the very microcosm of our bodies, possession or inhabitation takes place. The balance, however, is always tenuous. It tips sometimes in the direction of one life over another, or of life itself toward entropy, the violence that Levinas finds to be a perennial potential in the gaze of the other. That violence surrounds us today. What fuels these encounters? The Gnawa call it al-bliya, addiction, the kind of libidinal desire that compels the dancer to dance and the artist to write, and perhaps the ethnographer to do field work as well. Perhaps it is this desire, so often repressed in academic writing, perhaps it is this desire that compels the struggle with the spirits, the angels and devils of existence. And in Islam, you might know that a spirit lives on each shoulder, a good spirit, recording the good and bad acts of one's life. But are we conscious of what philosopher Karen Barad calls the queer polymorphous perversity of our own being? Hanea and Sabaku, we will win out, the spirit said to me. It also means we'll get there first, as if there were a race to win before taking possession of, even colonizing, the imagination. Sidi Mimun spoke to me in the plural, we. This struggle with the death of the ego, the nothingness within which subjectivity takes place. We, the spirits, we, the unknowable, we, the enigmatic, the powerful, the non-human. We, the 57% alien material in the human body, the viral DNA parasitic in the microbiome. We, the things that have no names, yet whose force is palpable. We live in you, with you. We will win out. In the struggle with the angel, Jacob prevailed, and henceforth he had a new name, he who wrestles with God, Israel. The irony of this statement now, at this moment in history, is not lost on me or any of us, I suppose. This struggle, however, is not just the foundational myth of the Abrahamic faiths. It also applies to spirit possession, as initiates must learn to work the spirits if they are to emerge from the experience unscathed. Kat khadim il-maluk, you work the owners with trancing, with sacrifice, and ultimately with acts of mortification, which train the body to endure, to withstand the cut of knives, the burn of fire, and flagellations like eating broken glass, another form of cutting open from inside, the wound. Such labor, which is the etymology of the word liturgy, by the way, such labor is a way to define the Newtonian laws of physics, to be on equal footing with the divine, to make oneself strong enough to look the spirits in the face and not be obliterated in the process. It is a conscious struggle and a struggle for consciousness. The ubiquity of possession trance across the globe speaks to the fundamental need to experience what Karen Barad calls the alterity within. And indeed, for Barad, a quantum physicist, philosopher, and queer theorist, the self is never just the self, never discrete. Rather, it is an infinity of finitudes, an unfathomable fathoming of possibilities and identities. For Barad, ghosts are real, and by extension, spirits and visions. They are real precisely because history leaves material traces, the quanta of cultural memory and imagination. The imaginal realm, in other words, is not just in your imagination. All matter is haunted by this absence on which life depends. Imagination, as many have shown, is material. from David McNeil's work on mental images and gestures, to George Lakoff and Mark Johnson's work on metaphor and embodied cognition, from Damasio's work on consciousness to Catherine Malabou's work on brain plasticity, the imaginal is embodied, like an atom, like a molecule. It is real despite the fact that it cannot always be seen. And like the smallest particles scientists have yet found, imagination is hard to pin down. It is defined by paradox, here and not here, acting like a wave and sometimes like a particle. The imaginal, like all epiphanous visions in religion and elsewhere, is open to interpretation. In some ways, it is this protean aspect of imagination that defines our very existence as human beings, and perhaps belongs to all species with the capacity for empathy. Perhaps it is even how we humans cultivate empathy, a method of going beyond not just ourselves, but deep into the molecular inside where resides what is most foreign in ourselves. We know, for example, that exercising our imaginations may enact a profound physical transformation in the very chemicals of our brain. The revival of research on hallucinogens bears this out. And while there is no science as yet that has measured the varying release of hormones, the creation of new synapses, or the plasticity of the brain in someone possessed, there are such studies on deep meditation, another form of ritual that allows humans to surpass the limits of the quotidian. Those studies, led by Richie Davidson at the University of Wisconsin, demonstrate that people who consciously change their brain states for an extended period of time actually increase the size and activity of the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for empathy. And cetaceans have a much larger amygdala than humans, by the way. Is possession trance then a method for literally expanding human consciousness? Or perhaps for understanding the alien within and becoming more than human or more fully human? This is one way to interpret my vision of Sidi Mimoun, a poetic and perhaps romantic way, since it assumes a discrete subject that is visited by another entity, provoking at times a break between self and world, where signs separate from their signifiers, and the human is in the midst of things, nameless things, alone, without words, defenseless against the angel that must remain anonymous. This is not to dismiss the presence of other beings. Jinn exist. I have met them. But where they reside is another question. Is it in the waterways, the drains, the rivers, as is thought of Aisha Kandisha al-Bahriya, the temptress of the sea? Or is it in the very material, the quanta, so to speak, of cultural memory, like a ghost that only some of us can see? And which some? And why they? Why we? Dreams, one might say, do not belong to us. Rather, we belong to dreams. They are part of what Frederick Jameson called the political unconscious, the symbolic substrate we share as contemporaneous humans, living and pulsing in the same historic moment. If history and truth meet in the if history and truth meet in the word, as Adorno asserts, we might also say that they meet in the dream or the vision, though it is not a literalist truth, but one that, like metaphor, like the imagination, is open to a plethora of interpretation, at once expressing the particularity of the dreamer and the collective zeitgeist of the moment. We see this in works like Charlotte Barat's The Third Reich of Dreams, where she documented the nightmares shared by dreamers leading up to the Holocaust. Are we in a much different scenario today? We might like to imagine ourselves impermeable, rational, able to withstand the onslaughts of violence and barbarism that is the human legacy. But under the surface, in what is almost a third of our lives, we sleep with both the angels and the devils of our species. We are connected in our struggle with the mythic angel that has no name. While writing this paper, Sidi Mimoun visited me in a dream, not a vision this time, though I did see him face to face. And in lieu of a ceremony with sacrifice, incense, and trancing, I wondered about propitiation. What was he exacting from me now? What is our obligation? As an initiate and a folklorist, I can only believe that the story itself is the first offering, and I hope it will be pleasing and acceptable to the spirits who are listening. Thank you.